Folks, welcome to Emeryville, California, and I'm joined here by a dear friend of the program and a master musician and a guy who has been a big supporter of mine, Gary Bartz. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you, Jake.
It's a pleasure to meet you in person.
Good. It's good to finally see your face, to see your real face.
It's my real face, that's right. You know, did you get a chance to go to Birdland, the original Birdland? And,
Oh, yeah.
and who did you get to see play there?
Well, I actually played there.
You did? Because I always thought that you grew up in Baltimore, but you really grew up in Harlem.
Well, I grew up in Baltimore. I left Baltimore when I was 17 years old, right out of high school. And I enrolled in Juilliard. So my first place in New York City was in Harlem. And actually on 152nd, I think, 151st and Broadway, I had a room in a couple's apartment. And so
a lot of cats stayed. That's how they got up there. I mean, they
yeah.
stayed with families.
Yeah. Well, we were looking for the Y or somewhere, some room, and we had the newspaper, the Amsterdam News, which was the newspaper in Harlem. And so I remember one funny story. You asked me about Birdland. I had been to Birdland whenever my parents would take us to New York during the summer vations. One stop had always had to be Birdland. We also went to Small's Paradise and a couple other places, but Birdland was the main thing. And actually, every time I went to New York and went to Birdland, Dizzy Gillespie was there.
Always.
And so I saw Dizzy with Sahib Shahab, the band with Sahib Shahab. I saw Dizzy with the big band, and I saw this young trumpet player, and he looked to be my age. And that confirmed to me that I could do this music. I could make a living. I didn't even think about making a living. I just wanted to play this music. And so that was Lee Morgan, of course. And because he was 2 years older than me. I was 15 at the time.
Wow. So Lee was up on the band. So he was 15 on the bandstand.
No, I was 15.
And he was 17.
He was 17.
And was it his stage presence, his vibe, or just his sheer facility that
it was everything. I mean,
I've seen the doc. I've seen the doc on Lee,
Yeah. It was his attitude, but also Dizzy recognized it, and he was there with they had uniforms, right? The band. It was a big band. Charlie Persip, Lee, Billy Mitchell, I think. Who else was in that? There was a lot of good people. I think James Moody might have been in that band. I know Sahib was also in that band. But because they had uniforms, but Dizzy, Lee, and Charlie Persip wore the same, different uniforms. So they were the stars. They were the standout. Dizzy, Lee. Lee took the break on a night in Tunisia. And that I said, wow, Dizzy didn't even take the break. This young kid, 17. So I'm looking at him, I'm saying, well, I know I can do this, And so he gave me
the impetus.
Yeah, the impetus, more energy to make sure I can do it,
This is one of the revelatory things, whether I talk to Tootie Heath or Charlie Neville, and then you go back and look at guys like Sonny Rollins, who's still cranking, and guys like John Coltrane. They did not start in bebop. They started in R&B. They started with R&B bands. Were you in Baltimore? Were you playing R&B? And more importantly, did you see cats like Hank Ballard and the guys that were playing singing raunchy lyrics and playing R&B? Because a lot of times, like Gadsden, they'd play an opening set of jazz, which was kind of modal at that time. But the point is, it was R&B, blues, right alongside jazz. And I want to know how you picked up on that, even in Baltimore before you got to New York.
Well, blues is jazz,
Right.
or jazz is blues. So, of course, that's the music, and it's an indigenous music. It comes all the way from Africa. I was just having a conversation with Joe Chambers, and I was talking about the fact that the blues was created solely, initially, for the voice. I mean, you can't sing "My baby left me, my baby's gone."
Right.
It was created for the voice. So when instruments started playing it, if they couldn't really sing, and if they can't sing on their instruments, they can't really play the blues. And if you can't play the blues, you're not playing this music. And so that is a bit of a problem, but that's a whole nother subject.
Well, but that's a really interesting thing. I mean, you got to be able to play the singing on the instrument.
Yeah, well, I mean, every great musician sings. Every great musician sings because voice came before instruments, just like ears come before playing. And so you have to go to the source. And, if you can't sing on your instrument, you're just playing. And that's a mechanical thing. I mean, you can almost teach a seal to play, but can a seal sing? And maybe he can, it might not be pleasant. But
Did you get a chance to play with some of the original blues masters? You know what I'm saying? Like Steve Swallow, for instance, grew up and was going down to the ghettos of New Haven, Connecticut to play with. I'm not saying Howlin' Wolf. I forget some Titanic blues original masters.
Right.
And, this is a guy who's known as playing jazz or whatever that we always have problems.
But see, that's the problem.
It is the problem. But I'm saying I don't hear the blues as much today in jazz.
No,
I hear a much more classicalized thing. But I just want to know from you, because my evolution with Gary Bartz starts kind of, members don't get weary, Max Roach, but I'm like, his career was well underway. So were you in R&B bands and blues bands?
Definitely. I mean, that's what we did in our neighborhoods. I mean, you had to be. I was in band. I was telling one of my students last week, because we talk about, of course I talk about the blues because they need to learn that and they want to learn that. But I was in bands that every song we played was a blues. Every song. Different keys, different tempos, but they were all the blues. And so, if that's grounding. That's the grounding. Of course, I was in R&B bands. I saw everybody from Fats Domino to Little Richard to Hank Ballard. I saw Harvey and the Moonglows with Marvin Gaye. I didn't know that was Marvin Gaye in the group, but I saw Marvin.
It was before he became a leader.
Before he even broke out, because he was still playing drums at that time.
Oh my gosh! Was he singing and playing drums?
Oh no! He would play drums in different groups. He wasn't playing drums with them.
Was it your uncle or your father who had the club?
My father.
Your father had the club. Mm-hmm. Paint the picture of Gary Bartz, 12, 13 years old, in the club.
No, he didn't have it. It wasn't until I was about 19 or 20 when he acquired the club.
He acquired the club in Baltimore.
Yeah.
So then at that point, you got a chance to go down and play there.
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk about, like, how did that work? Like, he's like, because your career was starting in New York.
I was in New York, yeah.
But you would be driving maybe to Philly.
I would commute from New York
Right.
backwards. Most people go to New York and then come home. I was going from New York down to Baltimore and coming back.
What was it like to play in your father's club? And I think more to the point, like I just had a chance to hang with Eddie Henderson up in New Rochelle or up in Westchester. It was beautiful, and he was talking. You guys teach at the same university in Ohio, and I just want you to talk to Katz about the ability to play on the bandstand. How many nights a week? How long a period of time? Even if it was to 3 people. And how that helped you develop your own individual sound on the horn.
Well, I mean, that's a big problem today, is that young musicians have nowhere to play. They have nowhere to learn how to play. And you cannot, and that's capital letters, you cannot learn this music unless you play this music and play it on a high level and consistently. You have to. I've heard. I love comedy, and I've heard comedians say, "Well, you have to have somewhere to go to be bad." So they would go to the Catskills, you
Sure.
know, and that's what they would go there. Hardly make any money, but they were honing their skills, you know. So at my dad's club, he had the club for 5 years, and so I had a chance to, like, say, be bad, you know, and learn how to be a band leader. I learned, and I'm playing. I know I've got a gig every week, you know, and sometimes it would be 5 days. Never. The only time it got to be 6 days a week was when he started bringing in name groups. Like I worked there with Max Roach. I worked there with, actually I joined Art Blakey and the Messengers. They were working at my dad's club. And my dad found out John Gilmore, the saxophonist, was getting ready to leave. And so he called me in New York and said, you know, why don't you come down and sit in with Art? You know, he's looking for, I think he's going to be looking for a saxophone player. John Hicks was in the band. John was a good friend of mine. So he had been trying to get me in the band anyway. And so Lee, by that time I had met Lee and we knew each other. So I came down and sat in and Art liked what I did and Lee co-signed it because he was the straw boss. He was
the straw boss.
Yeah.
So he signed off on it. But you, and again, 6 degrees of separation. You saw Lee how many years before with Dizzy?
About 5 years before that. Yeah.
Wow. So then, how long were you? And then was Cedar in the band? Oh, John Hicks was in the band.
In the band, yeah. It was Victor Sproles, John Hicks, and John Gilmore and Lee.
And what was that experience? So you joined? Did you just play with them locally, or did you go on the road?
No, I joined the band. The next gig was Boston.
Yeah, Junie Booth was saying that he was. Somebody was on tour with Blakey, and the drums
I was on the gig when Judy made his first gig with Art at the Village Gate.
Because he said they'd be driving along and the drums might be falling off the top of the car, like they were tied onto the top. Those road trips were pretty epic, and the circuit was pretty amazing too.
Yeah, it was, you know. But see, the dedication to the music, that's one thing. We didn't go to college. I mean, I went to college, you know, but most of us didn't. And you couldn't learn this music in college anyway, and you still can't, you know.
Exactly. No, and that's what I wanted to ask you because. Don't you think, I mean, again, putting it in context here, so many geniuses, African-American geniuses have died broke from this, you know, playing this music and never getting compensated.
Not just African, I mean, music.
But today's crisis is that it's not that cats don't have a place to play, it's that they don't have gigs, right? So they don't have money in their pocket. So then during their free time, they can create new musical vocabulary. Was there a period in your career where you were doing well enough? I mean, you were always on Prestige or you were always on, you know, Milestone. So was there a period of time that you can recollect, maybe it was N2 Troupe, where you were playing gigs, and meaning you were getting paid, and then you were able to go with the cats and create new music for fun?
I don't know whether I create music for fun.
Maybe that's the wrong way to say it. And just the idea of saying you weren't going in to do a studio date or to be a leader of a session with your own compositions, but you were able to just sort of, I don't know. Your gravy years are the years where music expanded. In my mind, the vocabulary expanded the most.
Well, I think what you're saying or what you're asking, I remember one time my friend Gratian Monker, he acquired
trombone player.
Yeah, great musician. He acquired all of the lead sheets for Thelonious Monk's music, and so we used to go to lofts, and Kiani Zawadi,
great trombone player, right?
Yeah, trombone and euphonium.
He's out of Detroit, maybe.
Yeah,
Phil Ranlin's
one
buddy.
of the McKinney brothers. Yeah, Bernard McKinney was his
brilliant cat.
name. And so he had a loft down on, I think it was Allen Street, somewhere down the Lower East Side. And we used to go by there and jam, you know. So we went by there this particular time, and we stayed for 3 days and 3 nights. We did not leave. We sent out and bought food, you know, and cooked, and people would come through, because you could play 24 hours a day. And so we slept there, ate, and played. And we went through every one of Thelonious Monk's songs. So, you know, different configurations, but I know Gratian and I were there, and Kiani was there, and several other people were there. But we always had a drummer and a bass player and a piano player. And so for 3 days, we went through every one of Thelonious Monk's tunes.
Oh.
And so we would do things like that. But I think what you're asking was there places where we went to study? Because that's more what we're doing, not just jamming, which at least I am. I'm studying.
That's right. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is you can. This is so important. You don't believe that you can teach jazz in academia, yet it is something that you are doing to. What can you do in academia today that is effective for younger cats, and what is lacking that needs to change? Does it have to do with the fact that the significance of music has changed in our culture?
Yeah, well, to your first question, for your first question, what you can do in academia is teach music. Okay? You teach music because that's what the science, that's what the art form is, music. It's not jazz, it's not classical, it's not country, it's not reggae, it's music. If you teach music, then you can go off and play whatever you want to play. You'll have the know-how and the knowledge to do all of that. So whatever, if you want to call them genres, I don't see music as that. I see only music. So when I'm listening to music, I'm not trying to categorize it. I mean, to me, that's another form of segregation, which this country really loves.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You know, if I say I'm going to see a reggae band, what picture of the musicians do you see?
Marley, Tosh.
Yeah, you see dreadlocks, you see, you know, Caribbean accents, you know. If I say country western, what do you see? That's a form of segregation, you know.
Right. You're from the Duke Ellington School, so you can learn music, okay, but then where do they take that, all that knowledge, in order to get their own sound? I mean, you can't tell sometimes who's playing today because they have all the opportunity to listen to the records.
But they don't listen. They don't listen because well, okay, maybe they listen, but they don't hear.
Go deeper on that.
Well, it's two levels of listening. Everybody listens because you need to hear things. But do you really hear what you're listening to, or is it just a surface listening of it? You know, as a musician, I saw a thread on Facebook the other day about this. I can't just listen to music. I hear it and I study it. And so it's different for me from other people. You know, people listen, Bruno Mars, you listen. Yeah, I like that, you know. But do you really hear? Are you hearing with the bass? You hear the connection of the bass and the drum. You hear everything, you know. So hearing, I believe hearing is like a fingerprint. And everybody hears different, which is why you might like Bruno Mars and I might not. Because we hear different things, you know. But do you realize why? Why is that different, you know? And do you care?
Right.
You know?
Well, I mean, I think it speaks to what you guys came up with, whether it was with Blakey or, you know, Jimmy Owens or Charlie Tolliver. The whole thing was about a musical conversation. And because of the lack of gigs for younger cats today, you tend to see people getting up there, and for lack of a better word, they're wanking it because they're trying to show huge facility because they don't know when the next time they're going to get up on the bandstand, as opposed to the call and response and the conversation. You know, but I want to switch gears for a second. Our first interview was 2011, and at the time we were talking about all the pertinent social issues that face our country, and you said, I still have faith in the young people, okay, to pull us through the morass. And Lord knows things have gotten even crazier because, as we know, racism is a form of insanity, and we have a racist as president in the White House. So there's an insanity that's completely affected the country. And I wanted you to talk to people, parents around the world, parents of minorities, parents of anybody, about how to teach their kids about being good leaders and to not see color. Because you said, we were talking about, we were talking about all sorts of, 12-step program, Racism Anonymous, and all this stuff that's sort of deep-seated in the culture. But you said, I have faith in the young people, and I'd like you to talk about a way in which parents can really teach their kids in 2018 about staying on the right path.
Well, that's a hard question to answer.
Or maybe the better question is, why do you have faith in the young people then?
Well, because young people have a chance. They come with a clean slate. But part of the problem is the parents have already been infected by racism. And so even against their knowledge, they might not realize what they're doing. But you don't come into this world seeing, and really color is only like 600 years old. Before that, people didn't see black and white. This is more of an American phenomenon, and it's taught. I didn't see it until it happened to me.
Right.
My best friend was a little, and I'm using the name because it was a so-called white kid, and he didn't know, I didn't know. We liked each other. That's good enough. We were good little kids. We did everything together, and one day he moved. His parents, I don't think, were too happy. He came to my house. I never went to his. But I never thought about that. I don't know whether he did. Because we don't see that as kids. But the parents are the ones that teach the kids that. Through maybe innocence or through not innocence.
Some people would say culture. It would be cultural bias. The way you grow up and you hear the terms being thrown around. But I guess talk to younger peeps out there about because they know it's wrong when they're young. They know it's wrong, but then they get inculcated in sort of this.
Yeah, because there's a privilege that goes with it. The system has honed it down to a system, And so, you can get better housing, you can get better schooling, you can get better everything. You can get better food, you can get better. If this country by this time doesn't see what's going on and the righteous human beings in this country don't give up their privileges and make a level playing ground, it's always going to be like this. And why should someone who has a privilege give it up? Well, we might not. If things would change, it might be the same way. And so the answer, I don't know what the answer is. The answer is education for one thing.
Well, yeah, and that's not very valuable. Although you're seeing teacher strikes, but you're not seeing
because the education system is a part of the racist system. So it's not teaching equality. It's teaching. When you see things like or when you don't see things like who was Paul Robeson, they don't teach who was Frederick Douglass.
I wanted you to tell me about tell the audience about Frederick Douglass. I'm serious. I want people to know who that. He flies below the radar. He's from Maryland.
Yeah, from Maryland, Eastern Shore.
And and talk about how inspiring a character he was.
Well, he was born a slave. He escaped. He got to Canada. He came back. He went to school. He studied. He became a scholar. He wrote probably the greatest speech ever given on July the 4th about the fact that this country, you want us to celebrate this. Why are we celebrating this? It's nothing for us to celebrate.
Right.
This is back in the 1800s he wrote this. And that speech still holds true today, But that's something because what is being taught is white history. in school. So the educational system has a problem. They don't teach black history, which black history is white history.
Well, I mean, white America needs to designate a month called Black History Month. I mean, well, why do you need to do that?
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, but that shows the segregation. I mean, this country is so segregated. It is it's really segregated as you go through this place. I once, when I was working with Max Roach, we were in Chicago, and Max was always, he was an activist. That's where I got my philosophy.
Absolutely.
We talked about that, But we went to some activist group in Chicago, and they had a map on the wall of the concentration where each, if you want to call them ethnic, group of people lived. And when you see that map, they had the Native Americans, they had we're so segregated. It's amazing.
Clustered everyone's just clustered in their own thing.
Little pockets, of, okay, here's where all the black people are, here's where all the Native Americans are. This is where all the Mexican, the Koreans, the Asian, this is just, we haven't even done away with the segregation. It's all cosmetic,
Right. I mean, and you're seeing stuff now in real time. I guess that's the other thing. Human animals. We are human animals. Okay. Not all of us. Some are more evolved than others.
Human is something to aspire to.
How far along in that evolution are you at? Are you a human? Are you a human being? Or because this is real. This is real important stuff. Because, like you said to me before, religion condones slavery. Right, all the things that we claim, or they teach you, thou shalt not kill, and then at 18 they give you a gun and say, now we're going to teach you how to kill.
And who to kill? You kill who we say. This is my enemy, so it must be your enemy too. I mean, right there, that's not a good concept.
Did you, when I interviewed Stanley Cowell, who's tuning in on this broadcast? He was going with Max to Africa, to the motherland, for a long time, to work with local leaders about education and also playing music. And I wanted you to talk about the first time that you went to Africa and to the motherland, and what your experience was like. Again, people think in history textbooks the motherland is, or that civilization started with the Greeks and the Romans, but it started in Africa. Yeah. So can you talk about the first time you went there? A lot of times cats went there to go see Tootie Heath and Kenny Barron, they went with Yusef Lateef to go see mosques, to see the prayers of the Muslims. Yeah. Ahmad Jamal wouldn't play there for years because of the apartheid. What was your history with the motherland?
The first time I went was in the 90s. I forget what year, but I went with a group of musicians. We went on Air Afrique. It was to Senegal, Dakar, and it was for the festival that they used to have. I think they may still have.
I think they do. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we went to. It was a trip. We were all excited. Big Black was with us. I think, who else was, Hugh Lawson. I remember he had a room next to me.
Was everybody's first time,
Dougie
really?
Fresh.
Wow.
It was a mix
Dougie
of people.
Fresh was there.
Yeah, it was a mix of people. And it was very exciting and enlightening. I remember coming back, I felt a little disheartened that first time. I've since been back. I've been to South Africa a few times. I've been to Angola. I've been to Israel. I've been to a little bit of Egypt. Not much of that, but I don't even know what to say. It was almost like the first time. I went to Iran in 1969 with Max Roach and Abby Lincoln. I think Stanley was on that too. I know it was Reggie Workman and Woody Shaw.
That is amazing.
Yeah, and we were guests of the Shah of Iran. So to be in a country where everyone was a Muslim or where everyone was black was enlightening.
That's what Kenny Barron said. Just to see people of the same skin color, all, in the marketplace, running businesses.
Absolutely, doing everything.
Was Harlem Harlem was a full black commerce town when you were there? I mean, there were places in Tulsa and all in the Midwest. There used to be all black run, economy run towns. Was that similar to Harlem? Sugar Ray Robinson was up there, and
Yeah, for a little bit, but I mean, I grew up in a segregated city, so I would see things like, the schools that we went to, which were all so-called black schools, but they had a white principal. The stores we went to might be in a black neighborhood, but they had a white owner. So you don't know, for the most part. I know one thing, during segregation, we had to have businesses. There were certain businesses that we had to have or we wouldn't have had it because we were not welcome in the other establishments. So we had our own movie houses. We had our own stores, grocery stores, everything. We had all of that. We had our own hotels. I know when I went to New Orleans with Max the first time, we stayed at, I think it was Wynton Marsalis. The Marsalis's grandfather had a motel, and I think it might have been Baton Rouge. So we stayed there because we couldn't stay downtown.
Right. Well, Ellis was in a mixed band back in the 50s, and they had to drive him to the black part of town when they were in places like Texas.
Oh, yeah, I started out like that with Mac. We'd go to Pittsburgh. We couldn't stay downtown. We had to stay at the hotel, the black hotel, or either rooming houses, during segregation, we were forced, maybe not forced, I don't know, that's not a good word, but we had to have our own businesses. And after desegregation, that all flew out the window.
Just for my own enlightenment, because that's overt segregation, but you say we're more segregated today than ever before. Explain that. Is it just, riff on that. I mean, how it, because we're not doing the, I mean, obviously people are going to say, well, there's, you have Oprah and you have the first black president and everything's hunky-dory, but you don't have separate bathrooms. You don't have a lot of the overt segregation, but we are still segregated and we're still hung up on it.
Well, we're still misogynistic. I mean, Europe, you go to the bathroom, doesn't matter, man or woman, we've got many things to deal with in this country, and we've had many chances along the way. I mean, look, in the 60s we had a coup, and nobody even hardly recognizes it. We had all our leaders shot. We had the president of the United States was killed in public. The hardest place to kill somebody is in public.
JFK?
Yeah, that's because when you kill somebody in public, you never forget it. We're still talking about Julius Caesar, who was killed in court, in the forum.
At Tu Brute, yeah.
Abraham Lincoln killed in a theater. I mean, these are messages. It's like the mafia. That's what the mafia does. This is no different. You can make anybody look like a leader or make anybody look good if you own the press. Now, Trump is getting ready to own his own network. Are you kidding? I mean, he's already had all the press he could possibly get. I mean, so as far as I say segregation and the problem is getting worse is because everything is being tightened up. The screws are being tightened. Everything's in place, and so now they can, you can do things like fake news. I mean, come on.
Right. Well, you're talking about his own network is.
I'm talking about that's the Republicans' line, fake news. If you know anything about history, Hitler used that. I mean, that's what they used. I mean, these are scary times, and it's been moving towards that all along. And so they make, you can make anything look good when you own the media. I mean, we own no media. We don't, is all these great musicians. And as a musician, and I'm not even talking white, black, or any color,
Right.
but musicians should own a TV station. We have enough money. If every musician gave $1, we could buy a radio station, buy a TV, buy a magazine, start a newspaper, you know. But the system is so tight that, I mean, in many ways, monetarily, mentally. I mean, we have these booking agents that book us. I don't see any black booking agents. I used to see the agents come to the gigs. They actually love the music. The Jack Whittemores, they love the music. They come and hang out with us, you know, go party after the gig. Now, the only time you see them is when they come to pick up their check. That's usually Saturday or Sunday. They don't care about the music. They don't care about you. And they're supposed to be booking us and taking care of us. You know, I mean, Lionel Hampton had Gladys. You know, I mean, the Shar agency looked out after a lot of people, you know. Yeah, I think this country is more segregated now than ever.
Yeah, that's very well articulated. I just want you to talk about whether it was your own bands or with, you know, I've known Rivers and Other Bodies was a live performance. And I want you to talk about the idea you can't raise the collective consciousness of the audience unless you are in the right headspace, okay? And I wanted you to talk about you and Hubert and Stafford and Howard King. And even if you were having a bad day, I mean, even if you were hung up on something or, you know, you had a bad vibe, how you guys wound up listening to each other and having a conversation and how spiritual it was to connect with the audience to raise the consciousness level, because that comes through on the records. And I want you to talk about the idea of how you get into that mindset of being able to create, you know, to expand consciousness with the audience, and then it comes back to you.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like it's a church. I mean, that's what I say. You know, my performances, I don't even look at them as a performance. I look at them as a service. You know, and that's used both ways.
Right.
But
speak about you. But so you're like a church. Explain
absolutely.
that, because that's foreign. You know, today it's just a formula trip. You see people all of a sudden. I don't know. Somehow it's become a white collar kind of music, and you go and you get a burger and a drink. The waiters are right in front. There's no chance to really transcend or burn. And I just just continue on the church theme there.
Well, but it's kind of like when you were saying it's kind of like in the 20s when the elite would come. They go to Harlem, to the Cotton Club, or to see Duke Ellington or somebody. That's called going slumming. I think it's still like that.
That was what was referred to at the time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it was always a derogatory thing.
Yeah. We're going, you know, and it's still kind of. I mean, I felt I did a gig a couple of years ago in Spain, and we were downstairs, and there was a balcony around us everywhere. And I kind of felt that the audience, because I didn't think they were that knowledgeable about what we were doing, they kind of came to let's go see the jazz musicians in their own habitat. You know, it's like, it reminded me of going slumming or something. Let's go. And I see people all the time, even in New York, well, I've never seen jazz before. I thought we'd come, you know, and so it can kind of be like that. And then they don't even realize it. That's what I mean. The little racist overtones. I mean, this country is so racist, and people are, like I say, if you think you're white, if you think you are a white person, then you're a racist, because you bought into a racist system that said you're white and you're better than most. You're better than other people. So you're already a racist, you know, without even knowing it. You know, they put that stamp on you. So you have to deal with that. It's not, I can't fix that problem. I didn't create that problem. You know, we didn't, you know, you people created, I say you people, but you know what I mean. the people that run.
No, it's institutionalized, absolutely. And I mean, going back to the bandstand though, I mean, did you derive inspiration from the cats that you were very selective? I've interviewed all the guys, Hubert, Stafford, I haven't gone to Howard yet, but you really you had your own idea about how you wanted to put a band together, but would you, in order to get into that headspace as a band, would you find inspiration from those cats too? I mean, I'm really, what I'm trying to get at is nonverbal communication in order to get to a point where the music becomes spiritual, it affects the audience, and then it swings back onto the band, and then all of a sudden it's really what it's about. That's what music is about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we all had like minds. You know, we all loved the music. We all understood what we were trying to do, our philosophies. We knew what we wanted to do. And the people that came to see us, for the most part, felt the same way. So, yeah, it was symbiotic, you know, the audience. Like, as a matter of fact, when I conceived the Untrue Troop, the Untrue Troop really consisted of everybody.
Right.
And so we would tell the audience to bring your own instruments, you know, bring percussion instruments.
No pianos, so you could go anywhere in the bush and play.
Yeah. And so, and they did. They would bring their instruments, you know, and they would play along with us, you know. So, yeah, we were all this, you know, we were all in this. We were all doing this. So, it you know, it's like a church, you know. I mean, and most musicians that I know came out of the church. My first solo was in a church. Most musicians came out of the church, so there's not much difference. You know?
Was it a sanctified church?
It was a Baptist.
It's a Baptist church. So was there a trap set, or was it just shakers and clap?
Well, no, they had no music. We just sang.
Oh, you just sang?
Yeah. Oh, but I mean, you mean my solo?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, no. Well, one Sunday, you know, they had the young people to come up, you know, and perform, and I performed "I Believe."
Oh, I love it. God, is there a tape of that around?
I wish.
I was going to say, this is important because, you know, my show has actually evolved and become dedicated to rhythm and the complexity of rhythm, because I believe rhythm is a form of love because it comes from the human heart. We have computers that make a lot of rhythm now, but there's no soul in that because there's no heart in the computer. Can you talk about some of the drummers, Max, or you know, any of the drummers that you played with, and how they used the bass drum? They weren't playing four on the floor. They were using it for rebound. They were using it with accent. Because the only music that I want to listen to is that kind of music. The pulsating double bass drums of today's times drive me right over the edge. And I just wanted to know about some of the drummers that you played with and how they use the bass, how they use the top of the kit to keep time and use the bass drum for colors or accents.
Well, I mean, for, you know, all the drummers are different. Each one is different.
Absolutely.
You know, so
well, but that was I must take. I mean, Cosby, when I interviewed him, you could tell anybody. You could tell Roker from Tony Williams. You could, but nowadays it's hard to tell who it is.
Well, but see, the problem now is, like, we can get back to, we never did finish that subject, is hearing.
Yeah.
They can't hear. All they can hear is what somebody else hears. They can't hear what they hear because they don't know how to hear. And that's because they learn music by reading. They didn't learn by hearing. You have to, this is an oral art form.
Right, it's passed down, right, no notation.
Yeah, you got to be able to hear. Did you ever see John Coltrane and McCoy Tyner on stage reading music? And you never would, because you learn this. You want to go to the play and see the actors reading from the script, or to a movie and they're reading from cue cards, you know? We learn this. If you love this music, you learn this music. And, you know, so back to your about hearing, they are only, the musicians of today are mostly playing what other people have already heard.
Exactly.
What other musicians, like, nobody can play like Dizzy. Even if you try, you can't imitate, you can't play like Dizzy, because that's his hearing. You have to see what you hear. If you can't see what you hear, then you have to play what somebody else hears. And that's a problem. And they can't do that because there's no way to learn how to do that. You can't do it in school. You know, you can teach the concept, but as far as how to do it, you have to do it.
There's also a leadership component to that. I mean, back when there was a touring circuit and there were bands, I mean, Miles would go up to John McLaughlin in the studio and say, play the guitar like you've never played the guitar before. Mm-hmm. Or he'd go up to DeJohnette and say, you know, he'd give him some sort of, you know, I mean, it was very unorthodox.
Because he could hear them. No one could hear better than Miles.
Nobody.
That's why he changed music so many times, because he could hear beyond. He wasn't just listening to whatever, he was listening to what everybody else was doing, but he used his own hearing to use it. Say, well, maybe I would do it like this, you know. But most musicians, they do it like somebody else did it, you know.
How did you wind up, I mean, did Miles sit in a club and watch you? How did you connect with him? How did he find you?
Well, when I first moved to New York, I used to see him at Birdland hanging out all the time at the bar, him and J.J. Johnson and other people. So I used to see him. I didn't know him then, but I know, I'm sure he saw him, you know, he noticed because I was always up in front of his face.
Yeah, you were definitely out. You were up front, man. So you didn't know who he was, but you were just.
Oh no, I knew who he was. Of course, I knew who he was. I saw him when I was about 15, 16 with the Train and Red and Philly and Paul. Yeah, I saw the band. I mean, I would go see him every time I could, you know. So finally, when I was working, I did a gig at Count Basie's in Harlem with Max Roach. It was a double bill. It was Count Basie, Max Roach, and opposite Miles Davis' band. So he got to hear me every night. And so I got to know him then, you know, because I've been seeing him every night, talk to him. And then one night I was working with, and this is years, might have been a year or so later, I was working with McCoy Tyner at Slugs, and he came in to listen to the band, and I guess he liked what he heard, or, you know, and he called me that following week to join the band.
What was it like? Is there some? I mean, I'm sure there's so many stories, but everybody has their own sort of classic Miles story as it relates to his sort of his wizard logic. Like you talked about, he was able to hear beyond. Mm-hmm. What was some stuff that he imparted in you that you still stand with today? If anything, what kind of pearl of wisdom or fearless?
There's many.
Just humor me with one or something that stands out.
Well, the main thing that I drew from the time working with him was how serious this music is. You want me to repeat that?
No. Just project out. People want to hear your voice. They love it. They're loving it.
Yeah.
The devotion to the music.
Yes, he was so serious about music, and that's why he was the genius that he was. This, you know, in all the ways, he was always thinking. But he was an artist. I mean, there are two types of musicians. You have musicians who play for a wedding, a bar mitzvah, or whatever. Then you have musicians whose art form or whose medium is music. And so they treat it as an art form. There's some things they may never do, you know. It's an art form. Some things they would do. I mean, you know, to help their art. Like I saw Marlon Brando one time on the Johnny Carson show. And he had just done the Superman movie playing Jor-El. Mm-hmm. And so Johnny Carson, he made $3 million. So for 3 days' work, Johnny Carson says to him, you know, you're this great actor of our time. Why would you consider to do something, you know, like Superman? You know,
so beneath you.
Yeah. So he says, well, you know, each project it has a different purpose. And some projects are, you know, to express my ideas. And in the case of Superman, I made $3 million for 3 days' work. Now I can take some of that money and do the projects I really want to do. You know, so that struck me.
How did that resonate with you?
Well, I said from then on, each album had a different more of a different purpose to me. Some albums I did want to make money, you know, and some albums, I mean, you always want to make money.
Always.
So that's a given. But some albums I, you know, had different purposes.
This is something interesting because when I just hung with Kenny Barron at his house in January, and he talked about his brother. The first session, Yusef asked him to compose a couple of tunes, and when he went up to Savoy, I think they recorded. It was Richard Davis and a bunch of cats, and what Kenny said that was amazing was the input from the musicians. You were not getting input from the producer. You were not getting input from the engineer about about how the music should sound and feel. It was a communal thing from the musicians. Based on what you just said, there were some albums that you did want to make to be commercially appealable for money. But was there a time where, I mean, you've made all these amazing albums. Was there a time that you saw in the studio a definitive change when somebody was coming in, maybe not necessarily to you, but saying, an arranger or a producer was saying, play the bass line this way, play it this way. Instead, it might have been, Steve Swallow said this to me. There was a Gary Burton session. He came in with his own tune. And Bernard, and again, part of it was that genre. Jazz was struggling as opposed to maybe soul or R&B or rock and roll at the time. Swallow came in with an original composition. Joel Dorn was producing, and Arif Mardin was arranging. And Arif came in and started to tell Steve how he wanted the bass line to sound. It was on his own tune. Steve became very surly, and it kind of imploded the session. It was tough. It was around 69 or 70, but the larger point was that the creative control of the music was no longer in the hands of the musicians. And I just wonder if there was a point in time. I mean, you were doing Prestige for Oren, who always left you alone, always just said, this is Gary's date, let's do it, let him do it. But was there a time in the studio when you saw a definitive change in the musicians losing the ability for the input creatively?
No, because you have to allow that to happen. I never allowed that to happen.
But if you were looking for if you were looking to make a more pop album,
I'm still going to approach it the same way. I'm still in charge. I'll take suggestions. I'll listen. And sometimes the ideas are good. You have to listen to other people. But I still make the final decision. I always make every record I've ever made, maybe one. Maybe two. But most of them, I make the final decision. It's my record.
Yeah, that's true. It was not, Swallow was not the leader of the date.
Yeah.
It just...
Right, now that's different. And now I've been on sessions where somebody will say, can you play more like this? Or can you do this? Or give me more? And that's okay. That's like an actor taking direction from the director. If it makes sense, and if I understand, I think maybe you might have a point there. Maybe we should do it like that. Let's try it anyway.
Absolutely. No, I was going to say, like, you always talk about the importance of having a band because there's just not a lot of bands these days. And and
that's on purpose, though. That's on purpose.
You think that's premeditated?
Absolutely.
Explain why.
Well, because if you got a band, you can't, like, every band Art Blakey had went in the studio. He never let a producer pick a band for him, bands are what made this music. But you have to be able to control it. Like, the business interests broke up Tommy and Jimmy Dorsey because two bands who are doing well is better than one.
Right.
They broke up. Well, I don't know whether they broke them up, Cannonball and that, but they did break up. The Marsalis went in Branford. They break up. They try to control bands. I've had many people want, okay, here's who should be. How are you going to tell me who should be in my band? If I'm doing a record date, I'm bringing my band because we know the music, we know each other, but business interests need to control this music, and they do. They control this music.
That goes back to my point. For a period of time, it seemed Libra, the Milestone records. Mm-hmm. I hear no meddling in that. That it seems like it's pure spirit. So that the bean counters, they actually left you alone. Mm-hmm. But then there was this tinkering that went on when all of a sudden the bean counters got involved in, not necessarily with your records, but they started to dictate how the music should sound. There should be this formula to make a hit. Mm-hmm. That to me was also, that was a debilitating experience for any leader or anybody. I was just talking to Greg Rico from Sly Stone. Mm-hmm. Him and Larry Graham are putting rhythm tracks together. This is like later 70s. Mm-hmm. And you couldn't get a better rhythm section than that. And the next thing you know, it's being replaced by a machine. Mm-hmm. So maybe you have. Have you ever gotten depressed to the point where you considered walking away from music because of the fact that the industry commands the control?
Back in the 60s, I did.
In the 60s?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Can you explain your mindset at that time?
Well, we were going, like I say, I believe we had a coup, and politically, we were in big trouble, and I felt that the world didn't need another musician. We got enough musicians, so I was going to join some kind of group and do something, But hanging out with Max and Mingus, I saw that music could be a weapon also. And then from then on, I knew which direction I wanted to go in. And that was about the time I formed Intertrupe.
When you say weapon, can you explain?
Well, music is so powerful. People get killed because they get too powerful. John Lennon. And I know these are conspiracy theories, but he was the greatest musician alive at that time, making the most money. Michael Jackson, Prince, Otis Redding, we could go on.
Marvin Gaye his father killed him, but
that's different, yeah. But
they become a threat, though.
Oh, definitely, they become a threat. We are a threat. That's why the business has to, and not even the business, through the whole thing, leadership, they have to control everything. And so they control the Bruno Mars. They want you to listen to this. They know who they want. You could be listening to Diane Reeves, but they're going to push Bruno Mars. They are going to give the money to who wrote.
Don't ask me about anything popular because I know nothing about that.
Okay. But
this is the other part of it.
They give money to the musicians who they know are going to give the money back.
And it's just no risk. Yeah. And, the cats that are still. Herbie came to Tucson, and one of my sponsors is my dentist, Dr. Butch Diggs. He's a brilliant saxophonist and a dentist in his day gig. But, Herbie, he's driving around in a bus, hauling the instruments in a trailer, maybe getting 3-4 hours of sleep. But he's still a name, right? Keith Jarrett is still a name. Wynton Marsalis is still a name. To me, the magical thing about melodic improvisation, just improvisational music, is that from the time that I love is that there was a hierarchy, but Art Blakey or Max would say, it's Gary's time now. He should be a leader now. And the producer said, I dig, so let's do it. Can you talk about passing through all the other stuff, we can only affect change in our world. How do you continue today to pass along, outside of academia, to give hope and to stretch the lineage of the music so that it will never die?
Well, it's an art form, and probably it's no different from any other period, because Beethoven, Mussorgsky, the musicians have this problem. Artists, Picasso, the Van Goghs, art is not valued as much by society, I guess, because it's not taught. You know, it needs to be taught the value of.
But how? Okay, so this is the thing. We live in a completely quantitative time, and music is totally unquantifiable. So how do how do you measure that? People just, as a cop out, they say, oh, you can play for the door, or you can pay to play, but they can't. If you just think that music is background noise or stuff you should sit there and I don't know, not lock in on, I'm not sure how you're supposed to ever put a monetary value on that. That's what I've been struggling with.
There is no monetary value. I mean, music, you shouldn't be able to make money from music. You know, I mean, it's a part of nature, you know, but you shouldn't be able to make money off of selling water.
Right.
You know,
right.
Anyway, so, but
well, before I let you go, we're off to see Benny Golson, Killer Joe, the original creator of that. Explain to cats like myself why McCoy and John Coltrane didn't need sheet music, and yet they could play transcendent music for 20, 25, 30 minutes at a time. Explain why they didn't need the sheet music.
Because any art form, you don't do it for any other value than you have to do this. Van Gogh had to paint. He couldn't have done anything else. Train had to play. Miles had to play. In an art form, that's what I asked my students when I first, especially young men, why do you want to do this music? What do you want to, you know? I mean, I did it because I had no choice. It chose me. I didn't choose it. And so the art form, I don't worry about the art form. The art form's going to be fine. You know, it's the politics around it. That's the problem. It's the surroundings. But there will always be great artists. There will always be great art. There will always be great music. Things go around in circles now. Everybody's learning by reading, and so that's why they have to do that. If I see a group on stage reading music, I know it's a rehearsal. I know they didn't take the time to learn the music. And so we never even thought about having music. Well, we did think about it, but when I worked with Max, he would not allow you to have music on the bandstand because he said there's no magic when you have the music, you know. And so we would rehearse in the morning and learn 3-4 songs, and at night he calls them, and we try to sneak the music out on the stage. And he would look over and see the music. He said, no music on the bandstand. No music on the bandstand. So we would move. So that made us have to learn it too, quicker. And so then I learned how to learn music quick. I learned how to learn. You have to, and that's one thing school teaches you. You learn how to learn, and because you never stop learning. I mean, one lifetime is not long enough to learn this, not this music.
Was Juilliard the same vibe as Howard when Eddie Henderson was there, and he almost the security guard put a gun up to him and said, "Get out of here!" And there's no jazz here. Were you playing jazz and getting run out of Juilliard?
Oh, that's why I went there. I went there to learn how to play. Well, I went there to learn how to understand harmony.
Right.
I knew how to read, but I didn't understand chords, and that's why I went there. But it was a so-called classical curriculum. I call classical what most people call classical music. I call that musical training. They have the longer time, and so they have the exercises, the etudes. They can teach you how to play, you know, but they can't teach you what to play.
Were you playing? Did they allow jazz to be played in the classrooms? Like
not in the classrooms, no. But I mean, we could play. I mean, you know, yeah. It wasn't that bad. High school, they did that, yeah.
Gary Bartz, such an honor to be in your abode, and I look forward to doing this again in the future. Continued. Someone just asked, has anyone made an album about how bad Donald Trump is?
I'm working on it.
Yeah, baby. Thanks for being part of the show, man.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right. We'll be back in a little bit on the Jake Feinberg Show.